David Fincher once described his vision for the World War Z sequel as something close to The Last of Us. Intimate, brutal, focused on what happens to people after civilization collapses rather than the spectacle of it collapsing in the first place. That version came closer to existing than most people realize. It had a script Mireille Enos called Genuinely Strong. It had a start date. It had Brad Pitt confirmed to return. And then, in February 2019, Paramount quietly pulled the plug. 7 years passed. The zombie genre peaked and faded, and World War Z sat there, frozen in development hell, the highest-grossing zombie movie ever made with no follow-up in sight. Then, at CinemaCon this year, Paramount officially confirmed a new World War Z movie is in development more than 13 years after the original. The announcement came from Paramount executive Josh Greenstein, who named World War Z alongside Star Trek reboot, Top Gun 3, Transformers, and a Call of Duty adaptation as priority projects going forward. No director, no writer, no cast, no release date, just the announcement itself, and the reaction from people who were actually there the first time around says everything. Mireille Enos, speaking while promoting For All Mankind Season 5, laughed and pointed out that Paramount has basically been promising this sequel for 15 years, noted that multiple different versions of the script had existed, and made clear she'd love to be part of it if it actually happens. Brad Pitt's Plan B Entertainment had secured the rights to Max Brooks's novel in 2007. The budget ballooned from an original $125 million estimate to somewhere between $200 and $270 million, Mark Forster directed. After disastrous test screenings, the entire third act was thrown out and reshot from scratch. The version in theaters was essentially two different movies stitched together, and somehow it worked. The film grossed over $540 million worldwide, became the highest-grossing zombie movie of all time, and Paramount immediately started talking about a trilogy. Peaky Blinders creator Stephen Knight was brought in to write the sequel script. The director's chair turned into a revolving door. Then, in the summer of 2017, the announcement that actually got people excited. David Fincher was confirmed as director, with Pitt set to return as star. Filming was supposed to begin in late 2018, got pushed to mid-2019 due to Fincher's commitment to Mindhunter, and then in February 2019, pre-production halted entirely. The reason that got the most press was China. The Chinese government bans films featuring zombies, and by 2019, that market was essential to any blockbuster's financial math. Reports indicated Fincher had requested a budget around $200 million, which Paramount wasn't willing to greenlight given the circumstances. When Fincher spoke about it publicly in 2023, he said he was actually glad the movie didn't get made when it did, because The Last of Us had come along and occupied the exact same creative territory his version would have explored, with far more room to do it properly. And that's the painful part, because Fincher's vision sounds like it would have been genuinely unlike anything else in the franchise. Not a globe-spanning war epic, something smaller, quieter, focused on survivors trying to rebuild in a world already wrecked. The revelation that Enos's character Karen Lane was actually written into those sequel scripts was also new information. Previous reports had only ever confirmed Pitt was set to return, which makes sense narratively because the first film ends with Jerry making it back to his family. You can't just ignore that. That intimate Fincher approach stood in direct contrast to the original sequel concept, which was massive in scope. The plan had been to take the film's ending, the discovery that zombies don't attack people who appear terminally ill, and push it to a global extreme. Millions of people deliberately infecting themselves with diseases that look deadly but are easily treatable, using illness as a form of human camouflage on a civilizational scale. That concept fits perfectly with what Brooks actually wrote in the novel, and it would have been the most direct narrative bridge between the first film's ending and the full-blown war the book describes. Because the novel itself goes places the 2013 film barely touched. It's structured as survivor testimonies from around the world, years after the conflict ended. The outbreak starts in China and spreads globally. There's a section set in North Korea where the entire population simply vanishes from satellite imagery. Nobody knows if they went underground or if something worse happened. Cuba, because of its geographic isolation, survives the initial chaos and becomes a major refugee hub and a new geopolitical power. Then there's what Brooks calls the 5-year war. Humanity finally stops running and fights back, country by country, reclaiming the world. By the time it ends, only 72 sovereign nations still exist. The European Union has merged into a single state. Dozens of smaller countries have simply ceased to be. There was reportedly even talk of using cut footage from a Moscow battle sequence filmed during production of the first movie and repurposing it in the sequel. None of it happened. And some of the most politically charged material from the book has only gotten harder to adapt over time. time. The novel has a subplot about governments distributing a fake vaccine to keep populations calm. When people find out they've been lied to, social order collapses. Pre-2020, that was provocative fiction. Now, it's a genuine minefield, and no major studio is going anywhere near it in the current climate, regardless of artistic merit. So how did the revival actually happen? The merger between Paramount and Skydance gave David Ellison control of a new slate of legacy franchises, and Ellison had already been publicly signaling that World War Z was a priority, describing it as a property with incredible global reach and untapped storytelling potential. The most interesting wildcard is David Fincher and Brad Pitt. The two just spent over a year making The Adventures of Cliff Booth for Netflix, a Tarantino-written sequel to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, with a $200 million budget releasing in August. If that collaboration goes well, the argument for bringing Fincher back to World War Z gets much stronger. The budget math looks different now than it did in 2019. The China market calculation has shifted, and the creative vision Fincher had was widely regarded as the strongest version of a sequel anyone had developed. With Pitt and Fincher having finally reconnected creatively, the possibility of them pulling this off with Paramount isn't completely off the table. That said, nothing is confirmed. No director, no writer, no cast, no timeline. Pitt's plan B is expected to remain involved as a producer, whether that includes an on-screen return, as Jerry Lane is still genuinely open. Enos herself has been clear that she currently has no insight into the new film's plans, even while saying a reunion with Pitt would be something she'd want to be part of. Realistically, there are a few directions this goes. The most straightforward is a direct continuation. Pick up in the aftermath of the vaccine discovery, follow Jerry and Karen Lane into the active counter-offensive against the infected. This respects the investment audiences have in those characters and gives the story somewhere clear to go. The bolder option is going closer to the source material. The anthology structure Brooks actually wrote, multiple storylines across multiple countries, covering the full scope of the global war. New characters, fresh entry point, but operating under the World War Z name. The risk there is disconnecting from what people loved about 2013, which was Pitt specifically, and the relentless thriller momentum. And then there's the middle path. Keep Pitt involved as connective tissue, build the central story around new characters in a different part of the world. The full geopolitical war epic from the novel would be the most ambitious and faithful adaptation possible, but the political complications are real. The sweet spot is somewhere between those two poles. The global visual scale of the first film, combined with a more grounded story that actually earns its emotional weight. 13 years is a long time to wait for a sequel. The whole point of this franchise, though, is that dead things have a way of coming back.